The world gave us lots of lemonade today, but we made it through it. So, okay, next slide. And I'm going to okay, this Chelsea was doing this part of the presentation, but the reason why we grow the natives from seeds is because of the genetic diversity. They give, those plants have a higher nectar content. They give the pollinators more energy for them to live and all. So it's very, very important that we make sure we're putting the natives into our yards, because there's lots of things that are hybrids, which look pretty, but that's for us. That's not for the wildlife and for the pollinators. They do that. Okay, so what do seeds need to grow? So they need water, light, and warmth, and also protect them from heavy rain. So in some ways, native seeds are just like the vegetable seeds and the flower seeds we've always grown. But in my opinion, they're easier to grow because you don't have to baby them. I had mine outside. I started them in November, and I just kind of put pine straw around them through most of the freezes. Then when the snow came, I threw a tarp on them, and they're ready to be potted out. So this is some of the ways that Chelsea uses. Now, she needs dependable plants because this is her business. But I mean, it don't take much to build the cold frame, and she has the low tunnels with just the frost cloth, or you can use the plastic over them to just protect them. Okay, so when you're growing them inside, you need a good LED light. The LED lights are great because they don't put off heat, but they put the right UV light rays that the plants need to start growing. You need good airflow. So a lot of people that grow seedlings, once they come up, if you have like a small isolating fan, that would help them, and it mimics the wind outside. And so that's part of the hardening off process. And it just makes the seeds stronger. Yeah. Plus, if you're stressed out, I kind of go in there, and it's kind of relieving to me. Okay, so these are my seeds that I started in the fall. And I have a lot of critter activity, raccoons and squirrels, and they think they are a better gardener than I am. So every time I plant something, they come behind me and they dig it up. So I put a little bit of tulle on top, and I planted them in like long, I guess, patio pots. And as you can see, a lot of them germinated, and all I do is water once a week if they're dry. So it's very, very easy. And this is them after the snow. So I have them underneath a bush so that the bush keeps the frost off of them and keeps the wind off. And that's basically all you really need. Now, if you're starting them outside and you're going to leave them outside, I think a sturdier container like these, and most of these are recycled, or they from the Dollar Tree, but they're a little bit thicker than what a nursery pot is. And that's the deal. You want to try and keep that soil kind of on the hot side. So. Okay, so this is the difference between native plants and vegetable seeds. Some of them need pre-treatment. So they go through a period of dormancy. So typically when the seeds are turn brown on your plant, and they, if some seeds dry up in summer, some in fall. Dr. Charles Allen said, when your seed dries on the plant, that is the correct time to plant it. So that's what happens in nature. So if you want that species to come back the following year, you can take those dry seeds and put them, back into your soil. The key is that they have to come in contact with the soil. If you just kind of drop them around on top of your grass or pine straw, most likely they're not going to grow. So you need that soil contact. And after I put them, I kind of stomp them to give them good contact. And I've had a good success rate. So all the pre-treatment methods, we're trying to mimic what the environment gives them. So a lot of them need, like, they called it moist stratification, which just means it needs to be outside in 40-degree weather for 4 weeks. Well, here in Louisiana, sometimes we get that, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get it too much. So it's just, that's the biggest thing. So you have to read up on the seeds you're trying to germinate to see what treatment methods are needed for that one seed. So, okay, so how do you know what it needs? Well, on the back of the pack, they have a letter designation, like a K or a D. And that tells you, and later in the slide it kind of tells you. But like I said, you can Google that seed. How do I start goldenrod? And it will tell you if it needs any pre-treatment instructions or not to get started. So she likes to use the native plant propagation by Jan Midget. And I think, was it Bill Fontenot? Bill Fontenot just came out with a new, very detailed book of how to start. Okay. How to start native seeds.
Native Plant Propagation by Jan Midgley. And you can ask Jan Midgley for this book, and you would write her for the book, as far as I know. Is that how you got yours?
Yeah.
Okay, so once you know, then you can just write it in your diary or whatever, or you can look it up every year. But I'm trying to put together a list, and it'll be on our website at some point in time, how to sow each of these seeds. So half of the homework will be done for you. Okay, so how do you know what a pre-treatment seed needs? Well, many seeds, when they fall, they stay dormant, and some of them won't even grow the following year because they need several years to be dormant before they start germinate and the seedlings come out. And as you know, if you disturb seeds, or when you disturb soil, you will get weeds coming up galore. Unfortunately, weed seeds, some of them can stay dormant up to 100 years, which is always the way. So most native seeds, most of them are good for like 5 to 10 years. Now, just in growing them the last couple of years, I found the only one, the Rebecca, the herder that I've been growing, I only get a 2-year shelf life on it, even having it inside, at a steady, out of the heat. So if you get Rebecca seeds, you might want to try planting them within that 2-year period. But all the other ones, I've had seeds like 4 years and they still came up. So it depends on the type of seed that you're working with. And then seeds that have thick coats, if you would soak them overnight, so you can kind of look at a seed. If it's teeny tiny, then that one doesn't need any pre-treatment. Well, as far as for it to germinate, you may just put it on top of the soil and it doesn't want to be covered because it needs light to germinate also. But if it's kind of if it kind of looks like a watermelon seed and it's big and it's thick, then it would be best to soak it for 24 hours before you try planting it. Okay.
Well, and some need to be eaten by animals, they need to be scarified.
Right. Okay, so these are the different types of pretreatment methods, and these are the C30 and C30D. These are the symbols that's on the back of your seed packet telling you what it needs. So cold moist stratification is when it needs to be outside in the weather, or it needs to be like 40 degrees or lower. And sometimes it can be 3 to 4 weeks. I've even seen one recently where it wants to be in that condition for 3 months. So it all depends on the seed. So there's cold moist stratification with the light-dependent germancy. Those are the ones I was telling you that are the teeny tiny seeds that you put in your tray and then you don't cover them. What you can do is put a little bit of the vermiculite on top of it, and that kind of ensures that it stays in place. And when you mist, then just mist kind of high so that they're just getting a very light watering. Okay, then there's warm moist stratification. If I had to guess, Louisiana, this is what we get the most because we never know what our weather's going to be week to week. And then, okay, scarification are those hard seeds that you need to take like a fingernail file and or sandpaper and kind of sand the outside of the shell of the seed to get it to germinate. And then there's a hot water treatment, which is the same as soaking the seeds for 24 hours, just like I said. And then there's also soaking. So the letter designations on your seed packets will determine which of these several treatments that seed needs. So with native seeds, the most important thing is patience. So you may, and I've had this happen, you get all excited, you want to plant this in your garden and nothing comes up. But that seed may take into the next spring to come up. So if you planted it a little bit late, then it's still a viable seed. And if you would just put it, instead of throwing the soil out and say, oh, well, I failed, I'm going to go, try and buy it somewhere else. Put it underneath a bush or a tree or a bench somewhere where it doesn't get direct sunlight, but it gets a little bit of light. And Mother Nature will water it for you, and next year you might be pleasantly surprised and it'll start growing. So then when you finish, you need to bump your seedlings up. And this is kind of like what you do with regular seeds, depending on, you need to wait for them to get their second set of leaves before you take them from the seed starting trays into a bigger tray. And when you are bumping them up, the size of the containers do matter. So, and I think that may be on the next slide. Okay, so the seed starting medium. When you're starting seeds, your soil needs to be light and fluffy so the water can go through it, but it has some water retention. And also so the roots can go through easily. If it has to, you can't use native soil, and usually potting soil has too much of the big chunks, but I do cheat. I take a good potting soil that has a good bit of peat in it, and I sift it through a colander. And when I'm finished with that, then I have this light and fluffy mix. So potting soil, you can get like 25 quarts of it, a big bag for $8 to $10. They want to sell you this little bitty bag like this for $4 to start seeds. And when you're starting a lot of seeds, I'm just looking for economical ways to start. And I have a little bit of time on my hands, because I'm retired, so, you know, I guess my time is worth something, but I'm not going to pay Miracle Grow for something that I don't believe in. So also you can use the cocoa core or compost, but you need to make sure your compost is from a hot pile, meaning there's no weed seeds in it. So if your compost pile does not get to 165 or above, you may get all excited and then all of a sudden you grow in dandelions or, you know, something like that. And so it's just best to use a sterile soil when you're starting seeds. And then for drainage, you can either use the perlite or the vermiculite. And with most seeds, you don't need to fertilize until they become seedlings when you're doing seeds. So. Okay, so you can sterilize your seed starting mix and that will kill off, if you're planting inside, this would be when you would want to do this. It kills off the fungus, gnats, and eggs and any pathogens that would be harmful to your seedlings. So you would dampen the soil a little bit, cover it with foil, and bake it at 325 until it gets to a temp of 180. Well, I don't think I can convince my husband to let me put soil in the oven, so I'm not going to be able to do this. But for the people who has maybe an outside, setup, or maybe I could do it on a barbecue pit, thinking about that. So, but they said when it's done, it'll have a rich, earthy smell to it. Okay, so your seed flats. So usually the little 6-pack ones are the best ones to use. And like I said, you want your soil to where it's light and fluffy, and the seedlings can go in. Now, I'm an overseeder. When I do it, I put 2 or 3 in each one, and if they real tiny seeds, they may wind up with 5 to 10. But then when you go to up them, into bigger pots, then you have to be very, very careful, because you can destroy them. Or what you can do is just cut them down to 1 or 2 seedlings per pack. So, and then the seed packs are easier to use with seeds that's been stratified in the refrigerator. So. Okay, so light-dependent germinators. So like I was saying, the very small seeds, they need light to germinate. The ones I'm thinking about is I have some primrose back there, and I mean the seeds are in this little bitty capsule, and I don't even break the capsule until I'm ready to sow them. The foxglove is like that. There's several of them that are like that. So when you get a seed pack from us, it may have a tiny little seed in it, and we'll say, squeeze before you plant. And that's why, because each one of those little bitty capsules could have up to like 100 seeds in it. You would just sprinkle them on top of the soil without cover them. Now with no cover, they're going to dry faster, so you have to keep them well watered with a mist, and you can just use a little hand mister or the pump kind. And like I said, the ones that do need light, if you're growing them inside, you can put the vermiculite on top of them, and that will help with the fungus gnats, but it still let the light through. And so if you're going to put seeds that are very delicate like that outside, you need to kind of put them under a tree or under an awning so that the heavy rains don't get them, and then they'll either push them deep into the soil, or they could make them come out the pot altogether. Okay, so bumping up your seedlings, when are they ready to bump up? So you need to wait until the seedlings have the first set of true leaves, preferably 2 sets. So you need to check out the roots sometimes too, because even with the true leaves showing, if the root systems are not established enough, then they're going to have a hard time taking them from this little bitty thing into a bigger cell, or bigger, putting them into a bigger pot. And also, when you handling them like that, it's best to hold them from the top at the leaves. You don't want to grab them from the stem, because the stem is very delicate, as are the roots. So, keep that in mind. Okay, so winter sowing, and we've all heard this one way or the other. It's all over the Facebook and the YouTube videos and all. So you can sow seeds outside in an unheated space and let Mother Nature give them the cold, moist that they need without our intervention. You just have to remember to do it like in fall. So native seeds, to me, native seeds have two seasons, fall and spring. So once you become familiar with the seeds and the plants that you're growing, then you'll know when to start those. So you can put those in seed flats, the plug trays, or like I showed you before, the other containers, and they'll be just fine. You just have to make sure that they don't get too hot, and and they get constant water. But the way we have rain all the time, once a week and usually when it was real damp and moist, you could go 2 weeks without, watering them and still be fine. Okay, so when you bump them up and you're going to put them into their own containers, the soil mix changes. So this is when you can use a potting soil mix. And so that consists of a fine pine bark. You can use peat or cocoa coir or compost or rice hulls, and you put a little perlite in them, and you put a little bit of like a dry fertilizer in them. So if you're doing larger plants, you could just use the pine bark with the fertilizer. So the bigger plants would be like the red buckeyes. I was able to pot probably about 40 of those over the winter. I started in September, and I got a pretty good thing, and then I had a second flush, so I just bumped those straight. Well, I put those straight into a gallon with the pine bark, and I really haven't fertilized them yet, and they're doing just fine. So, okay, so containers. When you bump them up, if you're taking them out of a 6-pack cell, they should really just go into like a little 4-inch pot. Now, if you know that they have a long tap root, then you may want to, get like maybe a 6-inch round or whatever. But just remember that that little seedling is going to try and grow into this thing, and it's going to say, oh my, I have all this territory now, and it tries to just grow out. And, you just need to, you don't want to overwater them. So if by having them in the smaller containers, you're kind of going to control yourself too, and they won't be overwatered. And so like the medium seedlings can go straight into quarts. And if you have them in the little bitty pots, well, she does commercials, so she uses like those 72 piece trays, and that's what she's talking about, the large plug tray, because they have a big hole on the bottom where you can just put your thumb in them and pop them out. And when you're putting your soil into those pots, it's a good idea to kind of compress them down, because that way the soil will hold together, and you're not going to have it just all flop out when you take your seedling out, and that's going to give the seedling another area of protection, before you plant it into your garden. Okay, so this is the part of the program where I come in. So I like to propagate my plants. So to do propagation, this is when you see plants on your property growing and you go, oh, I want to make more of those. So a good thing to do is like I have a lot of the black elderberry that I brought today, and those are real easy to propagate. So the tools you need when you're propagating is just a sharp pair of pruners or garden shears, just like a gallon pot or 4-inch pot, depending on how big your cutting is. You can use a plastic bag to go over the container to kind of make it like a mini greenhouse to increase the humidity. And then you need like a pot and soil, kind of like a lighter blend, but it doesn't have to be the seed starting mix. And then you can use a rooting hormone or cinnamon. Cinnamon is an antifungal, and that's all the rooting hormone does. It keeps the root from getting all mushy and all, and it gives it a better chance of rooting. So.
That is cool, Celie.
Yeah, in Aldi you can get a loaf of cinnamon for 99 cents. So. Yeah, any kind of cinnamon. Okay, so the best time to take the cuttings from a plant is usually in spring where the softwood growth is coming on. So for lack of a better example, like if you look at your azaleas and this, you know, it has a new growth up here. If you look down here, this growth is kind of a reddish brown, but this up here is green. That's what we were referring to when it says softwood growth. And that's where the roots will, you know, germinate and readily reroot itself from. So you can take cuttings in summer or fall, but in fall you want to do it before it starts losing its leaves. It's best to do it early in the morning when the plant is still hydrated. You want to kind of take it from the end of the stem and make sure there's no flower bud on it, or take the flower bud off, because you want all your energy going into the root. You don't want it to go into the flower part of it. And then you put your cuttings in water to keep them hydrated. And sometimes my cuttings will stay in water, sometimes, unfortunately, up to a week. And if they are on the harder side, they will still be viable, and I can plant them. Sometimes I lose them, but it just depends. Okay, so finding and knowing where to cut, this is the important part. So you need to make a cut below the leaf node, and you kind of make your cut in between. So the leaf node is where the leaves come out, and the section between the stem and that is called the inner node. So when you're out there just grabbing them, you can cut them below it, but then when you go to the potting station, you want to make sure you get that leaf node, and because that's where the roots are going to come from. So once you're going to put it in the soil, you don't want your cuttings no more than 6 to 8 inches long, because it's just asking that little plant too much to make roots if it's 12 to 24 inches or whatever. And like I said, you want to make sure all the buds are off. You want to remove all of the leaves except the two sets of leaves, because they need the leaves to photosynthesize with. And then I cut the leaves in half, and that indicates to the plant, oh, she wants me to grow roots. So she don't want me to grow tall right now. And so that's what that does.
I like how you talk to those plants.
I do. Okay, so this is the rooting hormone. They have several different brands. It's just a white powder. The thing to know with it, when you use it, I put it in the cap. I put a little bit of it in the cap, and then I put my stem in I dip it into water, and then I put it in just a little bit. You just need a little bit on whatever section is going to be under the soil. You don't have to bathe the whole thing in it. And one little jar like this will last you several years. So, and the same thing with the cinnamon, it's the same way. And this way you're not contaminating the whole bottle by using it. Okay, so the best soils for root cuttings. Again, you want a sterile potting mix. So I would use a bag mix. If not, the native soils are just too heavy for the roots to grow in again. I prefer to use 1/3 of a topsoil, 1/3 compost, and then one of like the small peat moss and all. And by mixing that all up, it's the combination that I like, because I don't know if y'all ever bought these days, but the commercial potting soils, they're mostly crushed up pine bark. And some of them aren't even decayed enough. I don't know how they get plants to grow in them. I really don't. So I'm not a fan of the name brands out there. So you want your soil to be able to hold moisture. So you don't want to try, a lot of people will, and you can do rooting in true just peat moss. But peat moss, the water just goes straight through it. And so you would have to water that plant every day or every other day. So by having the topsoil, the compost in it, those, they hold the moisture a little bit more, and that way you're not being just a watering person. You can go have other activities too to do. All right, and then you can add like a little bit of coarse sand or the vermiculite or perlite. That will help with drainage also. Okay, so when you prepare to put your cuttings into the soil, you can either use your finger or a pencil to make a indentation in the soil, and you put the stem in there. You want to put the soil all the way up against that stem to make sure that the air doesn't get in it, and you get all the air out and kind of tap it down some. Okay, so if you're rooting something like bee balm, which I have back there, you'll see it's kind of a running plant. So you can take that cutting, and you may have, and another thing would be like a strawberry little seedlings. You can take and put this part and this part, two roots in the same little pot, and just make sure it's all both sets of the roots in the soil where you want the roots to be. And then you can cover the pot with plastic, and that just keeps the humidity in it. A lot of people, when they're doing cuttings, they'll use like those Sterlite containers, the clear ones with a lid, and it just helps the humidity stay in it. I just have mine like in a tray with a little bit of water, and it depends. You can't put it underneath the gutters because then they become too much water in them. But I just make sure it's like a little bit of inch of water when I'm trying to get something to grow. And then you need to put it in indirect light. So any shady place that you have will do it. It does need some light, but it cannot stand that heat from the sun because it doesn't have enough roots to support it yet. Okay, so repotting it after the roots form. Usually it takes about 4 weeks for the stems to to grow. You'll notice new leaves coming out. You'll see new growth either sideways or horizontally. And then when you do that, you would have to transfer it into a bigger container, or sometimes I'll do like 6 or 7 in one pot, and that's when you would want to divide it up. You can also kind of tug on it and tell. If it comes straight out, then it was a failure. And then you can either try it or throw it away and start again. So any newly potted plants should stay in a shaded area for 2 to 4 weeks to just let it acclimate itself to that area before you put it out in your garden or on the, in the full sun. So it's best to kind of water them, once a week, just keep them on the moist side. And then, after that, you can either plant them in the garden, share them with your friends, and you have very little cost in them. Okay, there's another way you can use air layering. So this is like you leave the plant or the stem on the mother plant, and there's several different ways you can do it. So if you have a shrub, okay, say again you have an azalea, and it's kind of it's flowing and it's hitting the ground. You can just move the dirt where it's hitting the ground, put that stem under the ground and put the dirt back on top and put like a brick on it. And within, as long as you keep that spot watered and you keep the mother plant watered, then you'll have another plant from it that once the roots develop, you can cut it from the parent plant and then you'll have a second shrub or bush from that. There's another way that you can do, the next slide. Okay, so you can use like a grafting ball also. And I used this last year on a fig tree, which the fig tree, the stems are kind of on the soft side, but you would kind of layer, you would cut, bless you, you would cut the outer layer of the stem and you would put like I like to put a toothpick in there so that it doesn't grow back and heal it. And then you take this little ball, you fill it up with some good potting soil that's moist, and you clamp it around it. And then I covered it with aluminum foil so that it would stay in place and it keeps the moisture in there. You can also do that method with just a baggie. And then you could take like the spasm moss on the outside and then the soil on the inside, and you kind of clamp it at the top and the bottom, maybe with like a twist tie or a zip tie, and do the same thing. And if you use the baggie, you can actually see when the roots are growing. And it takes about, I would say 2 to 3 months for that. But I got a nice fig tree about like this, a start, from it. And then when you see the roots, you can cut it off of the mother plant, and then you have another start to use. And so this one is simple, the laying the roots on the ground method. So this is similar to what I was talking about with the azaleas, only they're actually putting the strawberry seedlings in pots. So if you, like African basil, that one you have to propagate. If it's touching the ground, you can just put that extra cutting into a pot. And as long as you have a clip or a brick to secure it, then it's gonna start producing roots. And when it does, you clip it and it goes on its own. All right, so that's the end of this part of the presentation. So we have 3 seed starting stations back here, and we have 3 propagation stations. And so we're going to help you. We have seeds, we have pieces to be propagated if you brought your own.